A big welcome to How Do Men, a podcast with the ambition of building conversation, co learning, and co creation in order to find solutions, tools, and concrete tips for the modern man. Today is a historic moment for the podcast as we have our first ever female guest on the show, and it's none other than Natasha Figueroa. Natasha is a richly experienced facilitator who helps people develop deeper connection with self and other through authentic expression. And her toolbox today includes authentic relating techniques, authentic movement and improvised dance, shamanism, wheel of consent, boundary practices, radical honesty, and Tantra. To get some background on Natasha, her desire to be in connection might be one of her most consistent character traits. Since she was a child, she's been on a search for meaningful relationships with herself and with others. In her early years, she struggled with anxiety, loneliness, and depression. And yet, something else was also there. Perhaps because of her own struggles, she became the person who was always there for others, to be with them in their pain, to listen or dispense advice. She moved all around the world, had many different careers, but there was always a love of deep connection that drove her on. She's lived many lives and has been many variations or vibrations of herself. But there are some constant themes: a longing to be known, wanting to be fully met, and desires for rich intimacy. Natasha, a big welcome.
Thank you so much.
What happens in you what comes up in you when you hear me talking about you?
Yeah, I noticed like my body temperature that was kind of running a little bit cold up until now, just like flooded with heat. And uh, hearing that version of myself like given to me just felt so, I felt so like known. You and I have had very little interaction. And yet I'm like, wow, you get me, Fabia. It's just like, wow, I feel, and of course, like that's a part of me, but I feel really well represented by what you just said. So I feel, yeah, touched and moved. Yeah, to hear that introduction. Thank you so much.
Thank you for opening up already, and I must say I am very. It's almost like meeting a bit of a rock star when meeting you, and why that is since for as long as I've been working around the field of authentic relating and in the field of personal development, your name has been coming up through various different forums and for various people that I have very close to my hearts. David, Daniel, Sami, all of which have been involved or are involved in Sculpt. And everybody's like, you got to meet Natasha. Like she's the master of connection. Like she will take you to another world just being with you. So I've been like, wow, who is this amazing woman? And now we've been struggling for a few weeks now to actually get this thing together. And we were supposed to have the connection in live in person, but
Yeah.
then we had to reschedule and so we're currently in this digital format. But I must say, immediately, just like upon just seeing you and your vibe, is like feel at home. I feel like I can just like remove some of my armor and just like, okay,
Mm.
let's just receive and just be in this powerful presence of this woman. So I just want to give you that and to say that so far it's just it's really meeting my expectations.
Wow, thank you so much. That's like it's pretty much the highest compliment I think you can give me. That you just hearing the impact of being with me has on you, like because that is so much what I aspire to create, is a sense of like welcoming and safety to just really be as you are. And usually that comes with some sensation of being disarmored, like, oh, the guards that I usually need to keep up in place, the things that usually keep me safe, aren't necessary here. That's like my highest aspiration. So just to hear that's having that impact on you, uh I'm like, yes, like, yeah, it feels triumphant and validating. Yeah.
Hmm. Thank you. Uh, I'm really happy to hear if we uh, I can have that impact as well back from just giving what I experience. And of course, this is what we're going to be focusing on more towards later down the line in our show today. I mean, obviously, you're a master in the field of deep connection and what that entails. And so we're going to come back to it. But as always now, and this is going to be so interesting, we want to begin with the question we always begin with, which is, what does being a man mean to you? And because you're the first woman to ever answer the question on the show as well, uh, feel free to also maybe expand a bit on how you arrived at the current understanding of what a man is, because obviously it's ever changing, and right now it's a lot of like dynamism around gender roles and all of that. So I'd love to just have you explore and take your time, you know.
Yeah, thank you so much. I have to so as you named in the beginning that we were supposed to have this conversation a few weeks ago in live in Stockholm, and for various reasons had to reschedule. And I remember the week before we were supposed to have that call, I just had that question rolling around in my head. And it was one of the reasons I only listened to one episode, because I also was like, oh, I really want to come to my own answer for what that is. Uh, and then I have since then had just like, uh, you know, 20 different iterations of how I would answer that, depending on what the day was and depending on, what I took in. And the irony of me not wanting to listen to what other people defined as what being a man is, I think ends up becoming my conclusion. It's like, what is a man is a construct. It's a construct, it's a set of ideals that any leadership of any culture gets to define. Because, like, how do I answer this question? Do I answer this question as somebody who's born female and my interactions with men?
Mm,
Do I answer this question as somebody who feels like in my spirit to be of two spirit, non-binary, and also feeling like a man at times myself, like I feel very much a connection to what is man in me?
mm,
Do I answer it from my culture as a Latino person and like what manhood and masculinity means in Latino culture, in my Guatemalan culture? Or do I look at my Danish side? Do I look at my mother's people and I look at that and think about what is like Viking, like, or whatever, the Nordic ideas of man? And that's just the ones that I have inside of me. And then I was raised partially in the United States, and what the American idea of manhood and masculinity is. It's like there's so many different skews, and the one thing that I can come up with is that it's simply a construct. It's what anybody kind of defines as like being a man. I might flip it to say, like, I started to think about, what does it mean to be a woman?
mm,
That was equally as convoluted. It was like equally, and almost anything that I could come up with in the last few weeks of these ideas of like, what is a man? There was nothing that I couldn't apply to also being a woman, or also being applied to as a non-binary person. And then I have like more of like a question for you. Is the question like, what is a man? Or is it, what is a good man? What is
mm,
it to be a man of today? What does it mean to be an embodied man? Like, there's a lot of like different variations on that question. And so I might even just throw the question back at you and go, what is it that you really want to know? Like, in terms of like, I want to really get your question of like, what do you think I would want to answer? Or like, what would you want to know from me about my interactions with men and masculinity?
mm. Wow. Thank you. If I can reflect back a bit about what I heard here.
Yeah.
So, what you say is that being a man is really a construct. It's a set of ideals which can ultimately, it will vary depending on which perspective you hold. It changes depending on where you are. The definition of manhood will be different, and you're pondering about your own perspectives. Being a woman, being a Danish person, being from the States, and being a Latino as well. Already there you'll have four different distinctly perhaps different perspectives and suggestions on what the ideal man is. And I hear you shooting back the question towards me, really, also to help me to nuance the question a bit. Like, what is it really that I'm after here? Like, is it a general question, or is it like, what does being a good man mean, or what does it mean to so I hear you shooting it back like that. And first of all, did I get you straight there? Like, was there anything you wanted to add to?
No, I really feel very gotten in what you've said. And I also want, I guess the only kind of amendment I would say is like, uh, I love that you asked this really open question to
Yeah.
your guests because I know that you ask it of everyone. And it's a little bit like a Rorschach test in that, some people are just going to go, oh, and they're just going to go ahead and say that. And then there's other people like me who would just kind of, the question almost says more about you, like this beautiful allowance. And so if it is like a true question, then I want to really get you and think
Mhm.
about what is the best way that we can be together in this exploration. And for that, I need some refinement. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you for clarifying also. And I feel I love that you're shooting back the question. And I think from the get go, upon starting this podcast, I think of myself as a captain of a ship, which is the podcast. And the ship is an explorer. So I take the ship, and the podcast is the ship. We explore together through the minds and experiences of all the guests, and with the purpose of discovering what the modern man is. Uh, really. So, hence the reason why it is an open ended question, because I've met many people, like in the podcast as well as outside, that have a very distinct, idea. They bring it down to archetypes. They bring it down to what is the purpose of a man. The purpose of a man is to be a tool to you put myself to use, and I want to be really like drained of my usage throughout my life, uh,
Mm.
in order to just be the best possible service I can be to the tribe. And there are different paths to choose. I mean, if you go down to the basics, it's like either I'm a hunter or a warrior. And as a woman, you'll always have the true purpose of procreation, passing forward life, whereas a man needs to find his purpose. So that's that angle. And then I hear from many people, especially I notice many people who've been in around the men's work field. We talk a lot about responsibility, accountability, and there it's easy to challenge in a way, because a woman needs to have a lot of responsibility as well, and accountability. So those words are exciting, yet I noticed that they need to be like, we need to dig deeper into them in order to actually create um, a set of like a really, if even possible, isolate whatever being a man is. But to answer your question, I would say that um, what does, like, I don't like the word good. Like because when first you said
Same.
good, yeah,
Same.
it's so,
Yeah.
because I'm so bad, honestly, in many ways, and good if we think in those
Same.
terms. Yeah,
Yes.
uh, but I guess a evolved man maybe is a good question. Like, what is the maybe like this actually? What is the qualities of a man? What qualities of a man is needed today? You know,
Yeah.
looking at the current state of the world, looking at whatever's happening right now, what do you see? Because bringing it back to the fact that a man is a tool to be used, then a man needs to then shape and conform to whatever is needed at this moment. So
Yeah.
yeah, let's bring it
I
back again. Yeah,
love that. Yeah, I noticed like yeah, I noticed something really expand, like I feel like yeah, something kind of just like an aperture almost opens up when I hear this really the qualities of a man needed today. And that feels very specific and that really works for me in like being able to meet you there. Uh, the first quality that comes up to me as you ask that question is is flexibility, I think. So I'm imagine you've heard this metaphor of yin and yang, and of course I often like to talk about yin and yang because it's like lot less gendered, and you know all language has its limitations and all ideals have their limitations, but I really love the idea about like what is yin is what is in flow and what is in yang is more fixed, and how like needing both of those. And so, really, I believe that for a long time, what has been really cultivated and really heightened and prioritized and labeled as good and positive have been yang qualities, things that are very fixed, things that are very goal oriented, things that are hard and solid and will not bend, like that overall feeling. And what we're seeing now is a lot of breakage because anything that is super hard and unyielding in a big storm will snap. And so often what is thought of as very yin, they always use a tree metaphor, like there's a big strong tree, but often those are the ones that get snapped during a big storm. Unlike the bamboo, which is
yeah.
amazingly, right? You've heard this metaphor, amazingly firm and resilient, but it bends. I mean, it can bend all the way down to the ground and come up. And I think the modern man really needs to be able to harness like not just like holding on to the yang. And I think again, we're such a binary culture. We feel like we have to be yin or yang.
Mm.
It's like, and that's like the very nature of that is that they work together, that they work in harmony, that's what's in balance. But for so long we've been polarized. Man hold the yang, women hold the yin. And then it's always like this codependence, and there's always this deep yearning and often a lot of resentment for not getting those other places filled from the outside. So when I think about like modern men, and of course women is a whole other subject, but since this is what we're here to focus on is about
I
manhood and
know.
masculinity, yeah, is is being able to really cultivate the yin of being flexible. Of I was talking with a one of my mentees this morning who is a really amazing, very strong. I mean, like what you might immediately upon seeing as a hyper masculine man,
Mm.
has been a physical trainer for 20 years, is just jacked and super strong and all of that. But what he constantly finds to be his weak spot is in his yin, and often feels like he has to choose between them as opposed to, and often now is starting to maybe, oh, I guess I have to lower my yang. And it's not about lowering your yang, it's about inviting the yin in. And so that is, again, I think a really perfect example of it's like not about lowering the beautiful gifts of masculinity, the beautiful gifts of yang, but being open and flexible and inviting more of like nurturing yin in to become like these complete people in of themselves. That's my answer that comes up for me. I'm
Mhm.
curious how that lands. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, exactly. So what I get a picture of basically, I see like an oak, the oak and the bamboo, and I see maybe your standard man has been more of an oak, maybe not an oak, but maybe something more like something very rigid, but just like still fragile.
Yeah.
What you're talking about is then evolving your circular qualities or your feminine qualities or the yin qualities
Yeah.
as what is necessary for a man at the moment to
Yeah.
really become more of the bamboo, the flexibility, the adaptability. And also, if you break down the word responsibility, it's ability to respond. So
Correct.
you
Yeah.
can respond to whatever is necessary. So in a way, I yeah, it lands really well with me. And I'm super like, there are many ways that this conversation can take at the moment. I just want to find my biggest curiosity. uh, I mean, it's such a low hanging fruit to ask what does being a woman mean, but I'm not going to go there yet. Like, I want to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
This call or at the moment,
That's
but
good because that I feel like that alone will send me down some type of like tunnel.
exactly, it's like
Let's
dancing
go
in
somewhere
the
else. Yeah.
yeah. But no, I let me introduce something that I am personally evolving into with my own understanding,
Yeah.
and let's see how that lands. Because we, as you know, we work with men
Yeah.
specifically, and we take men on a journey connected to self leadership. Like, first learn how to lead yourself, and then learn how to lead others, and that's the journey of Scalp. And we often get questions, first of all, from women. It's like, why don't you do this with women? And secondly, do we need to be men only? And um, what we have learned, or what I am beginning to mature into realizing as well, is that the current state of both men and women is that we are not, it seems like we're not ready to actually, I see unity as the end goal. Like, I see a longing in every person and every human being to be united. And I think that the most beautiful unity that there is, or not the most, but one of the most, is between men and women. Like, that unity, and how we are hoping to actually come together into one, where we are different, but in the unity. That's the unity is the actual thing that we're going for. But at the moment, we are just too damn mediocre to be able to actually reach that point of unity with other women. And I think maybe the opposite also goes in the same. Like, we're not ready at the moment to, because right now when we come together, we don't understand each other. We have such a different language. We don't have, and there's also seems to be a lack of trust between each other, because we don't understand each other. We haven't been introduced to different tools, because seem to be speaking a different language. And there I'm beginning to think and feel personally that what is needed from a man is to prepare himself for real unity, like
Yeah.
real unity with they call it the divine feminine. So I remember reading this when I first got started with personal development, like many, many years ago, and it was like sacred masculine meets the divine feminine. And upon reading it, I was like, sounds like a lot of concepts, relatively complex, but I'm beginning to see now that that's really what's happening here. We have to prepare ourselves for something, and the current state of men is just subpar at the moment. We're not able to, like, we have too many things to work on ourselves, and introducing men and women together into a shared training at this point, it's just not sustainable, or it's too fragile to do. Hence the reason why we think that men train with men at the moment, women train with women. We are introducing Scalp for women relatively soon as well. And we want to have parallel trainings going where we actually bring ourselves together in parts of the training. as a way to begin testing this thing. Like we might do 4 weeks only gender based, and then 2 weeks together, and then 1 week back, and then 1 week, something like this. And that's how we can begin to practice actually unity from both sides.
Yeah.
So yeah, being like preparing yourself for being able to hold the real power of a woman, the
Mm,
real, like actual full power,
mm,
the
mm,
receptive power of the feminine, I
mm.
believe is what is needed from a man today. Hmm.
Are you looking for are you looking for a response, or is there a question there for me in there? Or do you want an impact share? What are you looking for?
I'm looking for an impact share.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, the impact it has on me is like there's a bit of a weight. Like there's a weight to what you say. Like I actually feel like something like a gravity of it, and it tracks. It tracks with me. It tracks with me in my experience, even though I've had personally a different experience. I witness what you talk about. I witness very much. I witness, and I mentor both men and women separately, together. Like, I'm really aware of like everything that you've talked about are things that I have both seen and witnessed, and am helping support people in that process. And I agree. I agree that a lot of it, and I want to admit that like I wasn't always in agreement with this, and that's due to my own needs are different. And there for a while I was like, that's not what I need. So like, some judgment over what other people were doing. You know, a little backstory, like since I was a kid, like I was what we referred to back then as a tomboy in English, which you know, I everyone thought I was a boy until I was 12. Like no one, really tracked that I was a girl. I just looked like a geeky, very scrawny little boy. I ended up for some reason getting along better with boys. Like I understood them more. I felt safer in some way. I felt more understood and felt understanding. I also look back though, and my two best guy friends were super soft, sensitive guys. So there's also, I think we were all very much towards, again, in this beautiful balance of like open and gentle, but also like, like we were all, I think, pretty balanced in our way. Um, so for a while I was a bit resentful about like when like all the girls were together. I was like, ugh, like, I also think there was some a little bit of societal loathing of girls that was programmed into me to like be a girl was to be weak.
Yeah.
If you throw like a girl, if you like act like a girl or something like that, that's also weak. So I think a lot of it was also programming that I was kind of like mildly, there was like a self-loathing or a disgust or not wanting to be in that way. So I think there's a lot of mix up in there. All I know is that how it ended up leading me later on is when I saw like big groups of women and big groups of men. I was like, great, I don't fit anywhere, you know? So like, why does this have to be like this? And now at this point in my journey and working in the way that I have and unlearning a lot of patterns and ideas that are not really of my own making, I really see the deep, deep value on people working with like people. So whether that be if you're a woman and you identify with women and you want to work, like great. If you don't do it. Figure something else out, and if you're a man, like do all that. I love, the one podcast of yours that I listened to was with Navid, who I love and who I've also facilitated before. Um, and he's just a delight. Um, I think he was quoting somebody else, right? When he said something about like women raise boys and men raise other men,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? That was that podcast. Um, yeah, I really like that. I find like most things, it's not 100% true, but I like it.
Yeah.
I I really I say like even if we can just hold caveats for everything, I think we have generalizations because of what they are, and if we can always hold open room. So I really think that what I'm seeing in men's work has the potential to be really beautiful, and it also has the potential to be dangerous depending on who's leading those circles. There's also this idea that any one group of people, and there is a shared culture, and there's not enough outside culture or outside openness. There becomes, I mean, take the incel movement, take a lot of men's rights groups become kind of dangerous places which are harboring certain things. So, again, I like to hold everything in wholeness. You'll see that as a trend in my work,
Yeah.
is like whatever is true, there's also what is also over here. Um, but on the whole, I think what is happening and what I'm seeing with like the work that you're doing, the work that some of my other, people that I support and mentor are doing beautiful work. And the fact that they're working with me and that you've invited me, I think says a pretty good thing because you're like interested in another way and another viewpoint and outside opinions. As long as you're doing that, I think it's beautiful. And I commend you so much for doing that and for doing this.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you again for, yeah. I love your, like you're very, you remind me a lot about my wife. And maybe that's why I'm so fond of you.
Yeah,
She has this,
right.
she has this like quality of, this like beautifully just inclusive quality to her, like where I can sometimes get a bit like, oh, this is the truth. Like I see the truth and that's the truth. She's like, yeah, but like, have you thought about this? And it's like, wow, okay, maybe it's not okay, but this is the truth. She's like,
Yes.
but and it's like that's the dance,
Yeah.
where she's like, like receive the world, whereas like penetrating the world. It's like I see it so clearly in how we differ, whether that's biologically or like archetypically or energetically or just the shaping of the world. I don't know, but I feel very soft and more at ease when I hear you just open up constantly, just like holding many perspectives, and yeah, so thank you for that.
Oh,
Uh,
that's so great. It sounds like you picked a great one. So it sounds like you got great taste. So good on
I
you.
I pinch myself in the arm,
Yeah.
feel very lucky there,
Yeah.
and it's exciting to be on a journey with a partner and understanding, seeing each other and helping each other. And I think I want to bring the next question sort of out of looking at our and I remember us when we first connected, we talked about this, and something I've been challenging also my wife with, because she's into doing the work, but seemed very lonely for her. Like it's a solo journey for her, and we are wondering now, like at least now thinking of ourselves as a mature men's personal development movement, what's going on with all the women, like where's the women work, like what's happening here, like who's leading the way, is anyone leading the way, because I see a lot of women who are super flowy, and it's like especially in this field, it's like very flow, light, love, and I'm missing some masculine there, it's like, okay, this is the way, fuck sisters, let's go together and let's fucking build this shit. uh,
Yeah.
and I see very little of that.
Yeah.
And whenever I challenge my wife, she always kind of deflects the question or doesn't seem to know the answer there properly yet. She has said at some point, she's like, I don't know where all the elder women are. Like, we don't know, like, what is the path of a woman? What's the end goal? Is it to become a witch in the end, like a high priestess? Is it to become a mother? Is it both? I'd love to hear your perspective on this, and also to receive my challenge with love, but like, what's going on?
Oh
Uh,
yeah, yeah, I totally receive your challenge with love. Like there's I feel called in, I don't feel called out. I feel called in. Um,
Perfect.
yeah,
Cool.
so it's landing great for me. Yeah, where are they? Like that's a great question. I don't know, but I can't say like I didn't exhaust myself looking. And again, I can only speak from my own experience as somebody who has often felt very mm, of multiple worlds, and so that means there is a gift to that, like feeling like I can go almost to any culture and just kind of slide in and like join in and not be too much of an outsider. And then there's also a sense of never truly belonging.
Mm,
Like, so that's also in wholeness. So there's a more challenging aspect, and there's more like of a gift aspect. I mean, it's all a gift in the end of how I decide to work with it.
no.
But because of that, I don't want to say give up easily. That sounds a little pejorative, or it sounds like a little bit of like I'm talking down on myself. But for a while, as I was becoming like more and more I was starting to get more and more mentees. I was just like starting to gather a lot of mentees, and I realized that this was kind of the path that I was on. One day I was like, "Where's my mentor?" Like, and of course, part of my motivation in becoming this mentor is because I never had a mentor, because I didn't have anyone to look up to, because it was so lonely. And there were so many things. Again, I believe that my life turned out the way it was meant to. I needed to have for some reason, that long, cold, lonely slog, to knowing myself and finding joy, and finding evolution, or whatever you want to call it. But as I looked back, I was like, man, I could have really used this. And that's why I become the change I wanted to see in the world, like literally. But then even at this age, I was like, you know what? It's not too late. I can still try to find a mentor, because I think I will be a better mentor if I myself am a mentee. Like that makes sense to me. And I went looking and I did research, and I had interviews, and the trail grew cold pretty quick. Like really quick. Like I used as many, and I also do believe in the balance of yin and yang, of efforting and surrender, not just like going like at it all the time, and not like, oh, it'll just manifest it and it'll come. Like, it's really for me. Again, I only speak about my own experience. It's really for me about just like rowing the boat and then letting the current, and then rowing the boat and letting the current. And man, did I not come up with anything. And so what you're saying really lands for me. Is like, I don't know, like I did look into a couple of times, uh was I flexible enough to like maybe have a male mentor? And when I went and I looked at it, I was like, you know what, that's actually not what I think I'm after a few interviews, I was like, they seem like they had great medicine. It was not the medicine that I needed. And then I went off and I, interviewed a couple of women. And again, it was hard finding women older than me. That's really what I wanted,
Yeah.
was somebody who was, a bit further down the pike. Hardly found any. And when I did, I was like, I really wanted to find a woman of color. Like I really wanted to be in terms of a woman who like had at least some multi dimensional aspect, in terms of understanding otherness outside of just a female construct. And then I came up with nothing. I mean, it was really a little bit sad, and I like went like this for a minute, and then I said, okay, I need to just go back to being the best mentor that I can be, and still being open. like never stopping the search, but it's like a very, I can't put a lot of energy towards it. I just have it right here.
Yeah.
Your question of like where they are, I think society and the system has just meant that it's not quite open yet. I'm hoping that in 20 years from now, it's going to be chock a block, you know? Like that
Mm.
society has turned. So all of those women that are going to become those fantastic, badass old crones are still like the 25 years old currently.
Yeah,
Like, we're waiting for the next crop, you
exactly.
know? Like the crop that is my age. Like again, like I'm one of I just taught at a Tantra festival last week that was geared towards a younger person. I was the oldest person there. It was magical, but like there's nobody else. Like I'm 52. Like I'm not that old. Like but there's not a lot of people, and I think it's just because like still in the 60s and 70s there was still so much more focus to like raising children. They're all having their second wind after their second child has just gone off to university. Like that's
Yeah.
where like, when we've prioritized or we've made like what a woman's real goal is, it's like for her to foster a career and raise a couple of kids. Like it's just not going to, it's not, and it's not it like the energy has to get divided. Energy is not finite. Time is not, I mean, time is finite. Energy is finite.
Yeah.
So I haven't had children. So I've been able to really deeply focus on my work in a way that a lot of my contemporaries have not.
Hmm.
So maybe in another 10, 15 years, there's going to be a crop of women my age because now the kids have gone to uni and they have a second wind and they can get back to training and there's going to be a movement. So I have hope and I have understanding of the way that the system is work and that it hasn't cultivated that. So the time is now. And that's what I'm doing. I am mentoring facilitators of tomorrow. And so I'm making sure that I am helping change that dynamic. And until then, I just keep going. you know,
Keep trucking.
I just keep trucking.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Thank you for that answer. I I hear a sense of not finding, like, sometimes my wife says, they burned them all. Like whenever I whenever I ask, yeah, they were all burned, and
Wow.
so like the knowledge got the knowledge just like evaporated into, it's so difficult to find, and maybe we're still seeing a consequence of an active, like, suppression of that whole journey. And it was only like, what, a couple of hundred years ago. Maybe it takes time for it to refine, to rediscover, be rediscovered, because obviously the wisdom is there. Like the
Yeah.
wisdom is there, the somewhere, maybe scattered, but like the wisdom, like the path of the woman, like the real path, like the highest path of a woman. That wisdom is there, but maybe it's yet recovering from a lot of active suppression, in like passive and active suppression, and maybe it's just at the moment difficult to find it, and for it to be put together. So maybe you are amongst the ones that need to pick up the torch, and
Got
uh,
it. I got the torch. I got the
yeah,
torch. Full-time strapped to my back. And
exactly.
I also want to name that we're in a bubble here in Scandinavia. Like what you're talking about, you're saying it's a couple hundred years in the past, but like in so many societies around the world, it's still exemplified. Like maybe the stonings and the burnings are less frequent, but there's still public shaming that happens when a woman is too bold, like
Yeah.
consistently. consistently, just like in media, you see a woman speaking her mind. I mean, in the United States, just in the last elections for a Supreme Court, there was multiple women who came forward to say that the nominee was a rapist. And they were sent death threats just to speak up against this man. Like they were sacrificing themselves on the front line because they didn't want somebody to hold the highest court position in the United States government to be of a predator who's going to decide the rights over millions of women's bodies, which you now see is just falling by the wayside over there. And just a woman, a professor, a university professor, you know, well, like in, she had the all the honors of her peers, and was considered an upstanding member of society, would receive death threats and taunts for telling about her sexual assault that had happened 30 years earlier at the hands of this man. Like that's still happening today. So it's not like it's like all of these things permeate us as women, like still to not have this constant like, don't be too much, like be more aggressive but not too aggressive, be more, speak up your mind but not too much, like there's still a trap. It still feels like a tightrope, I think, for a lot of women. I'm one of the few who have just, again, I've gotten myself into this really privileged position of not really giving a fuck. And I have a lot of protective measures. I'm not that active on social media. I don't have people who can, you know, assault me for like, this is like, this is about the widest thing that I do. I've had a lot of people asking me like, oh, I should have a YouTube channel or something like that. No, because I want to speak my truth this bluntly and built and this boldly, and not receive a death threat for it. Like, like I have it, so I will do what I can do in my lane. Like I will speak as loudly as I can, and it will take somebody who's maybe more resilient than me to be able to speak it louder, you know yeah.
Thank you for opening up your perspective and helping me again to constantly bring it back to the wider perspective, and really also it just makes me frustrated to hear this, even though I know it. Like to hear it makes me feel angry, disappointed, and yeah, pretty pissed off about how we ended up in this. Again, it's so subpar. That's like where we are right now. It's the level of mediocrity of humanity at the moment. It's frightening, and but at the same time, understanding that we do the best that we can. I mean, collectively, we are at the highest level that we can be at the moment. But
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
I noticed you say at the moment, and I'm just like, this is the best we've ever been, bruh. Like this is,
exactly. I just believe in the limitless potentials of human being, and I see
yeah,
that we're not even close.
yeah,
Not even close to where we can be. And I think I want to rephrase my question actually about challenging you now upon hearing this. And I say, how can we support you? I mean, that is really what can I do in my role, and what can a man do collectively? If we want to, what do you need from us?
yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that question. God, that makes me like, I think most women just want to be asked that question, if I could generalize. Just hearing that question is like, I don't even know the answer, but thanks for asking, it's just like, what do you need?
Mm,
But really, if I think about it for a moment, um, it's moments like this. It's moments where you are curious, that you ask, that you that you invite us into the conversations, that you find out. And I think, again, I'm even kind of going to be a little bit of a hypocrite to say, like, like I'm still even really careful about just saying like men and women, because the variety in those subsets are so enormous. Like
Right.
I'm shy about saying Swedes are like this, or that this group of people is like this and that group of people is like that. Like, as somebody who straddles so many different, you know identities, like I'm really quite cautious about that, because I don't think that we can sum that up. It really is about treating people more as individuals, and not being really cautious about these ideas. So in having more and more individual conversations, like, oh, I talked to this woman today, I asked her these questions, these are her answers, and then the next week I talked to this woman, I asked her, guess what, they were totally different. But actually just fostering, just constantly having conversations. I love that you were even open enough to say, like, hey, I'm gonna mix it up, and I'm gonna invite a woman onto this podcast about, like, what about men.
Mm,
Like, that shows that flexibility that I'm talking about. You're modeling that very thing that I'm talking about is so needed. So I love that you're asking the questions, that you're opening it up. And I think there was something that came up from earlier, a conversation about, talking about this difference between men and the oak tree, and the feminine, with the bamboo. And it's also like what I've understood about power. For so long, power has been often more of like this masculine construct, but it's been like a very particular form of power. Like, we've labeled power as something that's like more of like a brute force. Like, when we think of power, we think of,
mm,
like, something that we think of horsepower in an engine, or like just something that takes something that breaks, or is able to explode things. And there's something that, working with the feminine, it's like it's a different type of power. Soft power.
mm,
Soft power, mate, is like, oh, like just being able to do that. Like, let me use dance as a little bit of a metaphor. This is the first time I'm coming up with this one, so let me see if it lands.
amazing.
But so I used to dance in a certain way when I was younger. I was very light. I was hypermobile. I was fast. I could move in all sorts of ways. And then as I grew older, and I had a lot of health issues, I actually gave up dance for a long period of time, because I thought, I can't dance anymore. Like, that's not, because I couldn't dance that dance. So I kind of put it on the shelf. And then in my early 40s, through after another big crisis, I was like, what am I not doing that I really, what did I give up, or what could I still be doing? If I only have 1 year left to live, like, what am I doing? And I remembered how much dance was so important to me. And I went back to dance, and my dance had completely changed. And what I noticed was so beautiful was, sometimes I would be, and the music would be pumping, and I'm like, I can't dance like that anymore. So I actually would dance to half the beat, while somebody else would be,
Mm,
dancing on that beat. I learned to dance like at every fourth count. And what I noticed is, it actually took a lot more effort, in a way, to go a lot slower. But there's something that unlocks in my body when I do that, when I go slow. So it doesn't take like less strength to go slow. It doesn't take less strength to be soft. It just takes difference. And that's, again, a limitation of humans, about like, and what I loved is, you're resistant to good. I almost had thrown that away as like a good man. Like, and I did italics for those people that are listening, is like what we have set as those judgments about what is good or what is bad or what is better, or but like, actually, soft power is something that has been brushed aside or unnoticed or unseen. And it's something that I really want to cultivate and really call in more. And I want more acknowledgement of it
Mm.
from men about what is that's taking. And I have to say, I have to give props to social media for that. It's like there's a lot of boobery and diversion that happens online, but there's also glimpses into worlds that no one ever thought that they were going to glimpse. And I see these videos of like boyfriends or husbands trying out these period simulators to see what women go through every month, and just like going, or brothers finding, like, I saw like a 15-year-old who his 13-year-old sister had just had her first period, and he wanted to see what it was like so he could be compassionate, and he looked at her like she was a superhero. He's like, you go to school like this, like, like there takes a power in the day-to-day perseverance of just like being in a woman's body, like, and not, and to honor the type of power, to acknowledge that it is different, but it is not less than. I think that's really where men could move forward a bit. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Wow. It's I get very moved like
Mm,
hearing you talk about this, and I it helps me to tap into the mystery of life. When you talk about soft power, I wanted to also get in like receptive power, even maybe
yeah.
versus like the directive.
Receptive power is huge.
That's the thing, because when you talked about the masculine power, I saw like a train just like running like incredibly fast forward. There's like these like sparkles coming from the, and then when you talked about the other power, I just saw like the ocean,
Yeah.
like a wave.
Mhm.
Those are the type of images that came into me, and I was like, this is, yeah, that power, which is, I mean, it's so easy to then say, well, that's the women power, but it's not. It's also the power in me. Like,
Yes.
yeah, it's the
Yeah.
power in me that I have. Like, where's my, I thought about that as well. It's like, where's my receptive power? I notice as I do a lot of work, do work on myself, I'm beginning to notice something, which is, it's like rest, like stepping forward, but like resting at the same time. There's a saying in Swedish called like vila i steget, which is to rest as you move. And I notice, I work a lot with scalp and like in the entrepreneurial world, like 12, 13 hours a day, feeling very passionate, like purposeful and driven. Yet I notice I'm leaning back more and more as I do it. Um, it's like, in that I get a perspective, and I feel, I feel others. I
Yeah.
rest, I trust, and I don't get too caught up in the deadbeat of the moment, but rather just like, oh yeah, here's a challenge. Okay, time for me to die, die, and then come back, and I'm like, yeah, okay, this is a new version of me. And then it's like, oh, time to die again. Wow, and back again. And it's
Yeah.
something like very easy with the process.
Yeah. Yeah. Like what you talk about is also like when you say receiving, for me, that's also like surrendering.
Yeah,
Like surrendering, that's that's hard. Like for most people, that is not an innate thing. And it's like there is there's a different version of that, which is called collapse. But that's not an embodied or an intentional, like that is being done to,
exactly. Like
right? But
collapsing.
surrendered is an action. It's like you're involved. It's like it's an action that you create that opening. And there's something in that. I remember once I talked about that, like when I was really trying to, this was way back before even like Brene Brown had really made this big movement about, the power of vulnerability. But before that, I mean, I'd gone through the world feeling that my vulnerability was a huge handicap. Like it just like it had me feel so exposed and so um open to harm. And yet I look back on it like I was hurt so many times, but I kept like it never stopped me. Like there was something in me. If there's some type of like power that I can say that I had, so no matter how many times I was hurt, I kept opening myself back up, mostly to more hurt. But eventually, like I developed other tools to support me in terms of intuition and boundaries and clarity and communication, all that stuff that fostered, made sure that what was filtering in there, but that openness never closed. Like I never became hard or cynical. And later on, I just thought about like there is nothing more badass than to like crack your heart open and take your heart out and hand it over to somebody and be like, I want you to treat this so preciously, and you might just take it and step on it. Like there's like what's more courageous than that? Like this I mean, I can't think of anything like to take things. And so a lot of times where I see men really have this power and this protection, but still some of the toughest, strongest men that I know, and some of them, that movement is just still as scary and tender as fuck.
Yes.
You know? Yeah.
Mm. I I wanna ask a final question on this first question here. Before we also have to move ourselves forward into the dialogue, because I want to also talk about all
Oh,
everything.
this wasn't the dialogue. Yes.
Like this is just the introduction, the question.
This is amazing.
I want to also talk about some of the. I want to talk about authentic relating here, right?
Yeah,
There's
great.
some tools in there, but
Yeah.
I feel. I mean, I what I hear you say is like what a man can do is to recognize the soft power in themselves and in women who maybe tend to have more of that than your conventional man, But what, as men like specific instructions, seeing that, is there, what can we be even more specific? What can I, as a man, do really? How do I see my woman's soft power? How do I, what do I do?
What do you do? I think again, and this is I think a really good pivot point into authentic relating and what we'll talk about in authentic relating. It's like our main power tool is curiosity. It's like you can ask me, but who you need to ask is your wife. And who you need to ask is your sister and your mom and your female friends and your female coworkers, because they'll each have a different thing. Like go like, when do you feel strongest? Like what is your superpower? Like getting really curious about asking questions of like the women that are in your life about what do you think strength is? What do you think is a woman's strength? Like tell me the way that you feel strongest, because like women will have such different answers. And invite more conversations about also when they feel weakest, because again, it's all in wholeness. It all needs to be held in wholeness. Like somebody can be like, oh wow, I feel really strong when I stand up out of my chair, and you're like, oh, that doesn't that doesn't seem very strong. And then you find out that they've been in a wheelchair for 6 months. That might change your, like when I know people who have really struggled with anxiety and depression, like I have in the past, when they're just like, I got out of bed this morning and I didn't want to throw myself out of a window. Guess what? that's a pretty major thing for them that day. So actually getting more wholeness and curiosity about where people have come from, what they struggle with, and then what they can celebrate. Like holding more people in wholeness and investigating. And again, social media is both doing great work in this department and doing terrible work in this department, because not only do we have the juxtaposition of many people only showing what they want to be seen on social media, whether it's highly filtered or highly curated events, or now you have the other bridge where you see a lot of almost performative vulnerability,
Mm.
and people weeping in ceremony, but they've set up a camera first, and you're like, wait, like the jarring juxtaposition of like, what is wait, is this authentic? Like, is this any less authentic than the other thing? And yet we're also seeing a lot more bravery and courage about people opening up and really sharing like where they've come from and what they're working on. And like there's so much out there, and it's crazy to try to filter it through. So the best is to start with the people that you're closest with and have more challenging and intimate conversations, trying to see the people around us in wholeness,
Mm.
and know that everyone, no matter what you're seeing, is that there's something else happening there. And all we can do is show that we're interested in seeing what else is there, because it takes interest from me for me to go like, what's, like, oh, you're having a great day. So I just started off like, again, a mentor session that I just had. And at first it was like, oh, since I've seen you last, at first it was just him telling me everything that was going great. And I'm like, great. And then I'm like, now tell me what's not going great. Like, and welcoming that just as equally with the same amount of enthusiasm as I did about the things that were going great. Wow, that's going not so great. Okay. Wow, good for you for telling me and for you tracking and for that celebrating the things of acknowledging where things aren't going great. Can we hold that up with the same love, and can we meet those parts as equally as loving? So that's a very long-winded answer to your kind of like, or just like of like, how do we make these strides towards like embracing more softness? This is what I'm talking. This is soft power too. Getting curious, investigating, being open, and not coming in with a question, like true curiosity, not like, why are you like this, but like, why are you like this? Like
Mm.
it's a tone change. The
Yeah.
masculine often comes in with like, okay, I'm going to ask you a question, but I kind of already have an answer in the back of my head. And there's a little bit of a trap that if you don't answer it, if it's not close to that, there's a defense. So there really needs to be an openness when we ask questions and are curious to not know what the answer is, and to embrace whatever the answer is. Yeah.
Oh, it's such a beautiful and simple answer, and I think something that is also so potent, and also checking like what comes up in me when you say this is really something of a development in my and my wife's relationship the last few weeks and months actually, where I have made a lot of assumptions about her, uh, like loads of them, and also I'm a relatively demanding person, I think, to be in a relationship with, because since I now work with men's personal development, it gets so influenced. I come with these like grand schemes and like visions of, this is how we are to evolve, looking like 30 years into the future. And, it's like dynamically, this is how our energy, and just present a lot of, basically statements and suggestions, and just assuming that she's going to vibe with all of that, and just like be super open and welcoming. And I realized that, and I'm relatively verbal, I communicative. So for me, it's easy to just share whatever's going on inside of me, and I communicate, and I take up a lot of space in our relationship. And I asked her, I was like, I realized I never really asked you what it's like to be in this relationship. Like, can you please just show me your world? Like what happens in you? and we went for like hours. She just started talking, and I was like, wow, like I never, like I never asked that question, like what is it, like how is it for you to be a part of this unit and
Wow.
just share everything, share like, and she just opened up, and there was so much there. And I've been with her for 4 years now, never asked that question.
Wow. Okay, to the people that are just listening, not seeing, I have such a huge smile on my face right now. I'm so lit up by a couple of things. One is that like you are owning that you are a lot in your relationship and that you never thought about that. And like what I really love about you is like what you're tracking. You're like, yeah, I'm doing this stuff, and I come home and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna continue to take this
So
here.
intense. Yeah.
Yeah, super intense. And again, as I mentor people, like, yeah, super familiar with this dynamic. And what I also love is how much you're owning how many assumptions that you were making. Like that you were like, wow, these were things that I was just defaulting to and imagining like and not actually slowing down to be in relationship enough to like check and find out like check those assumptions. It's not like all of those assumptions were necessarily wrong, but if you're not even pausing to check, like does it matter? Yeah. So I'm really lit up by your like tracking of yourself and that you are addressing it and that you were brave enough to ask that question because like you're probably like, yeah, I mean, it must be intense, but generally good, right? She's I'm sure she illuminated you on some things that helped you see yourself in wholeness more. Yeah.
Completely,
Yeah.
completely, and how I think of how I subconsciously have been. I think, I mean, we carry collectively part of the experience of the world. So I try always zoom in and out, like micro and macro.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I see whatever I do in my relationship is probably what the world is doing. So
Yeah.
I think there's a level of, it's a down like a it's subconscious downplaying of, or like suppression maybe, of the soft power that is happening in me, and
Yeah.
and not really going there, exploring this new sense of power that is in all of us, and I see that, and I would really want to own that as well, and it's really helped me, like help me open up to, yeah, a whole world, and the mystery that is her as well, and this has of course helped our dynamic improve a lot since then.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And to just name that that's what you're almost modeling it, like that goal oriented, of like, setting goals and setting standards and how we're gonna lead the men of tomorrow and stuff like that. That is that more that yang power and being surrendered to like, yeah, I don't know where the women's movement is going. And like that's like, we'll see as it explores and like, being more open to what is and what could come is more of that soft power. So that's really like, I think modeled right here. And then maybe I could pivot a little bit towards like, just naming that you were talking about one of the main tenets, one of the main practices of authentic relating, which is like our second practice is called assume nothing,
Mm.
and which is kind of a very misunderstood phrase because it's aspirational. It's not actually to assume nothing. It's actually to recognize that most of the things that are happening inside of our head that haven't been verified yet, until they're verified, are assumptions. So instead of like, wow, you're a really curious guy, aren't you? Like the difference between me like going ahead and labeling you as this thing, but be much more relational for me to be like, wow, I'm having the experience, or like I'm having an assumption that you're a pretty curious guy, and you get to lean forward and say like, yeah, that is me, or like, yeah, sometimes I am, or like there's more openness to being with what is there and really being with the real you, as opposed to me saying like, wow, that guy's angry, or like, oh, she's having a bad day, or something like that. We immediately, that's an immediate box, that's an immediate label. Curiosity dies. We don't see people in wholeness. We see them as these ideas that we've put on someone, and there's like very little like it's much harder for anybody to break out of that. Think about a coworker that you had, or an ex-lover, or somebody that just like you would just like put a label on them, bad person, or not emotionally available. There's no room to maneuver, and no one is any one thing. And the thing that I was yesterday, like I was kind of grumpy yesterday. I don't know, the weather was off, or I had like a headache, or something. Something like I was just kind of a grumpy person. If somebody met me in that one moment,
Yeah.
like I might be totally reduced to that experience, as opposed to going like, oh, this person maybe is not having a great day, or they would lose out on a whole world. So for you to just name that you have assumptions, to acknowledge that they're assumptions and then check them out. Like it's just such a beautiful practice, but it is a practice. So I commend you on
Yeah.
on 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 opening yourself up in that way.
Thank you. I've really learned a lot from this framework about, yeah, like naming it, playing with it, like having also a bit of fun with it, because it's
Yeah.
usually so dense and like intense usually. But it's like
Yes.
we all have assumptions. Like I can probably name, like, still after this like amazing conversation, probably have like 50 or 100 more assumptions of you that that might not be correct. It's just like
Yeah.
it's how we live, and it's also evolutionary, right? Because we can't just perceive everything we see as completely new. It's not practical for a human being. Like if I,
Correct.
oh my god, like I know that this is a quirk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't have the energy to go in here. Like, what is this? Like, with every item. So we have the assumptions there.
Yeah. Making an assumption that like, oh, going down this dark street does at night does not this dark alleyway does not feel safe. That's an
Exactly.
assumption that I'm going to run with. Like, like like that's a good default. Like they're there for reasons. It's not to vilify. I think for a long time we've almost vilified assumptions. Like, oh, don't assume. Like that's not right. Like it's actually what you say, meeting that, yeah, we assume it keeps us safe. It keeps like things moving. Like we can't check everything out. We have to default. And in the general world, that works okay. But in relationships, that's where we're getting into this fine line. So this is why we're talking about this, is like in the world of personal development and relationships. That is where we get really limited. And again, you can have like, I can have an assumption when my partner comes home and take one look at his face and go, "Ooh, he had a rough day," you know? But it's for me to not just like immediately go and kind of try to caretake or do like that, but it's for me to get curious and be like, "Wow, I'm do I have I have the sense that you had a tough day, are you is that true?" And just to check out, and they can go, "Oh no, I just stubbed my toe, just coming in the door." They can be like, "Yeah, I had a shit day." Like I don't lose either way, They get a chance to like see my care, for me to check it out, for me to get it's it's building the relationship. It's always fostering connection. That's what we use it for. The dark alley, I'm not trying to foster some connection, like I see a shadow in the dark alley. It's not about connection for me.
Exactly.
And
Don't
as you
don't stick your
say,
hand in the fire. Like,
yeah,
yeah,
and as you say, you can get really playful with assumptions. I love that idea, because a lot of times in self-development work, things are very, very serious.
very,
And for me, it's a lot about making it very accessible and very much like, yeah, I might look at somebody and be like, I have an assumption you like me. Like I love to do things like that. I'm just like, I have an assumption you think I'm pretty funny. Like, and is that true? It's a great flirting technique, by the way, as well. So that's I like that as well.
yeah. Wow. I wanna zoom out a bit, just
Yeah.
to take a person into, and not asking you to hold like a presentation or anything, but just take a person through like authentic relating. How what is it, and why is it important? Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank
Maybe you
you.
could talk about the five principles. Go through them a bit.
Yeah, sure. So, authentic relating is a set of tools that really are there to foster connection. Connection first and foremost with myself, with yourself. Like really actually having a set of practices that are continually having us connect to our, yeah, like our true selves, outside of the ideas that we have of ourselves. Or, we get a lot kind of trapped in identity, about like, I am this, like what I do for work or what I look like, or, my role in my family or in my community. But it's really about staying alive into connection about who we are in any one moment. And then how do we foster that in connection with other people? So we have these 5 practices, and I'll just give a little headline for each of them. And again, these are aspirational, these are goal oriented. So the first step is welcome. The first practice is welcome everything. So, welcome everything doesn't mean that you condone or consent to everything that is happening, but that you simply acknowledge that this is here and you don't try to spend energy on denying or resisting. Like, uh, say you're about to throw your wedding and there is a storm outside, it's like you could throw a pretty huge fit and scream and, like throw the biggest tantrum you want, but it's not gonna change the weather outside, like it's about going like, okay, this is here. Do we all like put on a bunch of wellies and grab a umbrella and then just like have like a different type of situation here? It's about pivoting, and it's about being accepting and surrendering to what's happening. It doesn't mean that you might not want things to change, but you can say like, okay, this sucks. I'm not happy about it, but it's here. And the advanced level of the practicing is actually embracing everything that it comes to go like, wow, this hurts. And like, how can I make the best of it? Like, how can I allow it to serve me? That's a more like that's a more deeper level of the practice. But the first is not to resist or deny what is happening, to say this is here,
Yeah.
and what do we do with it? I think is the most plain way to say it. Yeah.
Feel it and then work towards, instead of reacting, responding. Yeah.
Responding, going back to, yeah, your responsibility piece. Like, how do I respond and react? Like, how do I go, wow, things are happening for me here. Like, but to say like, this is what's here.
Mm.
The second practice is, as you just were able to model, is assume nothing. And it is recognizing that we need to consistently check more what is happening. Again, if you're working on a very practical level, or if you're out in the world, like go ahead and rely on your assumptions. But they are intimacy killers in relationships. As you just said, in 4 years, you never asked that question. You're like, oh shit, like, better late than never. So, good on you. But to check in constantly about just like, how is this for you? Like what's this like curiosity is the key powerhouse that drives this practice, is constantly checking in. And what's really beautiful about assumptions is once you really start to practice that as like a muscle or a general thing to consistently practice, like the learnings that you make are so huge. Like I used to think of myself as like a highly intuitive person. Really, I found out later that that's just like hypervigilance due to trauma, but there you go. So now one of my so there again is something that ended up working out, and that I've made it work for me. But like, yeah, but even when my intuition is at its absolute best, there's still probably something I'm missing. Even if I have something or someone say like I meet you and I'm like, oh man, like I'm intuiting this about this guy and this about this guy. I might have you 95% just pegged, but there's one thing that I don't know about that is the entire game changer. But if I don't slow down to check out and say like, hey, like this is what I'm assuming, I'm assuming you're a really positive guy and you're super curious and you're really goal driven and blah, blah, blah. And I'm telling you all of this. But there might be something that you really, if I don't check that out, there might be something about you that has me not see you in wholeness.
Hmm.
And then, like where is that for our connection? So again, I could unpack each of these. I'll try to keep them a little bit concise,
Of
and then we can
course.
always go back and visit. The third one is reveal your experience.
Hmm.
Revealing your experience. I think we've modeled that really well at the beginning of this call. You instantly were sharing what it was like to be with me, and I was revealing what it was like to be with you, and we are just like having a whole like vibe fest. You were telling, you were just like, how does it feel to hear that introduction? And I'm like, it feels amazing. Like, and I got to really, and then you got to feel soft and you got to feel more of me. It's just like the connection zone gets increased. That's what we say. There's like more surface area for connection the more we reveal ourselves. And so that doesn't always mean revealing positive things. Again, I put in air quotes, but it's also, or the things that we want to be seen, but it's also this idea of like, yeah, I'm also going to reveal something that might make you like me less, or, might have you question me or look at me funny. I'm opening myself up. I'm making myself vulnerable. Like that's like, again, there's no intimacy without risk,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah. And I want to come in here if I kind of just cut you off a bit, and because I think a lot of people, upon hearing, revealing yourself, or that's at least what I've experienced sometimes in these type of practices. They go into the story, it's like, here's my, traumatic experience from my childhood, and they go through the entirety and thinking that they reveal themselves, where it doesn't really involve any risk for them because they've already processed it. It might be for someone, it might be super revealing if they open about for the first time about their sexual
Yeah,
abuse or whatever it was that happened to them, right?
right,
But at
right.
some point, it just becomes this like endless like program that you run because you want to steal attention. And then I believe that the most like I find revealing what's actually happening right now inside of me is where I think there's the most risk to open up.
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct. It is. And that's why in these practices, when we're doing retreats and we're doing trainings, what we really stick with is what is here right now between us, you
exactly.
know? So we might be like being with you, like what it is like to be here now, because it is true that like now anything that's happened in the past, even what happened at the beginning of this call, is now it's in the past. It's now moving into story. And the future hasn't happened yet. Those are all ideas or something, not to devalue those things, but in a way, the only thing that's real, that's truly real, is what is in now, what is in my body, what is right here. And so that's where we end up really, that's where we first practice our attunement. It is what's going on right here, right now, inside me with you. What it's like to be me with you right now. And sometimes that, I mean, that is deeply naked. Like that can be really, really deeply naked if two people looking at each other. Can you imagine just looking at somebody and just being like, okay, like, it's like it really is taking off like your clothes uh,
Mm.
in a way and some protection. So
Yeah,
yeah, so I love that. Thank you for bringing that back. And again, these are all like I'm running through these things kind of briefly, and they
yeah,
all have a lot of nuance, and they all take a lot of practice.
of course. Yeah. There are four
The
levels,
next,
right? I'm going to
yeah,
ask.
yeah. The next one is own your experience, uh, which is also something that you know, you modeled just a little bit ago when you were talking about this relationship with your wife and this conversation that you had. Just like just owning, like your part and like owning that you didn't talk about you hadn't thought to ask these things or you might be a lot to it's actually owning our story and who we are more that takes a lot of welcoming who we are and not putting pieces of us our way. It's also owning our experience and saying, this is what's happening for me, rather than you're the cause of what is happening for me.
Yeah.
Right. So like the quickest example I always give is, you know, you made me mad when you didn't call me back last night. You know, said you were going to call me back and you didn't. And so you made me mad. That's not owning your experience. Owning my experience is when you didn't call me back after we had set that context. Yeah, I felt angry. Like I felt angry and I felt disappointed. I felt let down. I even notice whenever I give this example that like the nuances of what I'm feeling start to expand. Like I can't just say like I was angry. I notice like instantly my terminology changes to like I felt angry. Oh, and also disappointed. Oh, and also let down. But I'm having my own experience. So I'm saying this is you had there was an action
Yeah.
and this is my interaction. And what that really does often is lower a lot of defensiveness between somebody being able to be with me.
Yeah.
Like I imagine like, if you are the recipient of that, this is an assumption that I have, but this that'll check out. But like, me saying like, hey, when you didn't call me back, like, you made me angry, as opposed to like when you didn't call me back, like, yeah, I felt angry, and like there's an immediate.
Yeah, it's very disarming, and it allows me to receive you much, much easier, rather than getting attacked. That or
Yeah,
yeah,
the attack. I think it's the attack that's missing, and that you can more be with like, oh, that's the experience she's having. Like
yeah.
even if it's on an unconscious level. So that's the whole, like that's a little bit the headline for the own your experience. And the
I really want to comment a bit there as well,
yeah,
because I think owning your experience is where I see most people have a difficulty, especially when they're triggered. Like, wow, how easy it is to shoot out accusations towards a person. This person is this. He's a narcissist. He's doing this or that, or she is this or that.
yeah,
There's a lot of pointing fingers,
yeah,
and I sometimes wonder, it's like it's all pretty much been written in all the books. Like the ancients, kind of like the mystics already figured it out. It's like whatever is discomforting right now in the present moment is your trauma calling for your attention. So
yeah,
whatever trauma you had in the past is facilitating itself through an experience in the now. This is already written everywhere, yet people cannot remember that. They get so engaged in pointing to it. It's like this person is evil and is doing this and is doing that, and I see it everywhere. The lack of ability to own your experience, and also assume and understand that whoever is causing this discomfort is just a messenger. It's
yeah,
your trauma calling you home. Yet over and over and over again, I see
yeah.
kids not being able to understand and receive this, and
Mm.
there we end up in these endless conflicts everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On to like just to bring in some of my soft power and again my desire for wholeness, like what, as I'm listening to you, like my compassion comes online, because like yeah, you're right, like this has been around for a millennia, but what's also seemed to have been around too for a really long period of time is a real conflicting messaging of like codependence,
Mm.
of like, I mean, from the moment especially women have been raised, is to, you're talking about men being in service, but like, women, that's programmed pretty much into. It's about like, I mean, everything from Disney to,
Yeah.
romance to like whatever is talked about, like you take care of somebody else and they'll take care of you. So there's a lot of mixed messaging in this,
Agreed.
and a lot of like, um yeah, a lot of entanglement, a lot of like relational entanglement and emotional entanglement. So it becomes really much like, wait, which one, like what programming
Agreed.
we listen to? And then you get again the relationship between like men are just like, yeah, you're supposed to be independent. Women are like, no, you're supposed to be codependent. And it's like, no wonder it doesn't work. Like, like we're also getting opposite programming.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Thank you
yeah,
for bringing in the perspective. And I was actually more so thinking about conflicts amongst men at the moment.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and the inability to just own their trauma and understand
yeah,
that what's happening right now is a traumatic response. But
yeah,
that's just my personal coloring at the moment. And I think
yeah,
ultimately you gotta zoom out and broaden the perspective always, and seeing,
yeah,
again, everybody's doing the best that they can, and at the moment where we are is where we are, and
yeah.
you know but I have my right to be frustrated as well. So I'm just
You
sharing that,
100%,
Yeah,
100% you do. And that's why it's so beautiful to have conversations that are so open that I can be with you and be like, yeah, this is what you where you are. And then like I'm always here holding like that's almost like my job in life is like for you to be in your truth and for me to also be like, and
yeah,
there's going to be other truth out here and over here and over here and down here, and that we can be with all of it and go, yeah, wow, like just us having different truths
of
doesn't
course.
mean we're on opposite sides or anything. Like we can go, wow, look at this beautiful tapestry of life, and like, man, that's what lights you up. Wow, that's so funny. What lights you up is getting up at 5 a.m. and like going and jumping in the fjord and like causing it fucking fantastic. I don't want to get out of my warm bed until 9 a.m. Isn't that amazing? That like you do you, it's like and then we go to the last practice, which is perfect, which is honoring self and honoring other. So talk about yin and yang. Like honor self maybe sometimes comes a little bit easier to the yangs, and honor others sometimes maybe comes a little bit is easier to the yins. That's just
Mhm.
a blank assumption, and of a stereotype. But um honoring myself means like the reason why it's honor self and then honor other. It's like the putting those like putting honor self first is deeply important for a lot of people to go like, let me really figure out like what it is, like what my boundaries are, what my needs are, what my desires are. And here actually when we start to look at it from that viewpoint, the yangs don't necessarily come out so great. Like or let's just say the men. I'm going to switch back and forth.
I love it. I feel so targeted.
Yes, yes. Let me put this slightly, yeah, in a way. Do you know how many men I work with who are super, super goal oriented in so many ways, but then I ask them really about their true heart's desire, and they all look at me with complete blankness. Like they might go like, well, yeah, I mean, I want to get this job and I want to build this house and I want to go this thing. And then I'm like, what are you yearning for? What are you longing for? And what does like a real embodied relationship look like? And what would that look like? Or how do you long to be touched? Do you know how many men I've asked?
Mm,
How do you really, really long to be touched? Not what you've been programmed to like want, by porn or media or whatever from your older brother, or but what is it you truly long for? And do you know that is such a difficult question to ask. So in a way, like there is this idea of like honoring yourself by like charging ahead and going for the seat at the head of the table and like, but that's all not, we're not talking about that on a relational level. It's talking about like, what is it that I truly long for? What do I need? And what can I say? Like, this is okay. It is up to me to provide this for myself, not anybody else. But then there's the honor other, which means that I am not going to sacrifice the comfort or party of somebody else, like to get my needs met. So like often this gets a little separated, like again, like maybe in men's world we're like, men, you gotta take what you want and like, you get all this, but like fuck anybody else who gets in the way, or like let me push over an old lady, like to get to the head of the table or to the front of the queue. And then you have the kind of also the collapsed version of people kind of just like always trying to prioritize other people, but never really ever fully getting their needs met. So you often have this like real dichotomy. What we really need to do is other people going, this is what I want. This is what I stand for. Are you able to join me here? No, cool, man. Like I hope you line up with somebody who can meet you there and like have a good time. Or like, yeah, maybe we can like catch a drink once in a while, but there's no real like overlap. Like we just if I know truly what I want, that means I don't have to mess around too much with like what I don't want and be resentful in relationships and not have my needs met, all of that, or going to people pleasing. So that's
Yeah.
that's the final practice. Yeah.
Oh, wow. I wish I could. Yeah, I wish I could. I understand. I wish I could show you the type of work we do in Sculpt, because I imagine when you mentioned something like men's work, there's this idea of what it is, and how it's very yang practice constantly, like become your purpose, like vision, like leadership, and all of that, and in reality, we really try and practice to the best of our ability, not men's work, but personal development
Yeah.
uh, for
Yeah.
men,
Right.
because we're trying to see that, and we're relatively early on in the game, really talking about the fact that there are 4 billion men, and that you can have all the way leading towards super feminine man, towards and what for encouraging everybody to really find who they are. How do you find who you are? What stimulates you? And we're using, I mean, a big. We have actually integrated most of or all of the authentic relating practice
Yeah.
into, like, the whole structure is built into everything that we do there, because it's such an important tool, and
Yeah.
such a rich, it's such a framework of potential for really understanding people better, understanding yourself. uh,
Yeah.
and I really want to thank you also for going through this in such a nice and still very rich, even though it was not the I think we got a really good taste of it. And I just wanted to add in that authentic relating can be practiced in itself through ART, like the Authentic Relating Training Network, who
Yes.
hosts different weekends and weeks, and like longer, like it goes in level 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can become, like, they have a leadership program as well. And what I want to also ask is two more questions as we're slowly approaching the end of this. Where one question is um, going to be a bit electric or challenging, and the last one is just to understand, if someone wants to work with you, or like how do people, what are you working on right now specifically, but first, the first question is, are you ready for it?
I'm ready. I
Yeah.
love it. I love how you already like just like set the context. You're like, there's something spicy coming. So good.
Exactly. Well, my question is, what are you avoiding right now that you should be doing?
Oh, that is a good one. Oh, I like that and I appreciate it. There is First of all, I really need to figure out my taxes, but that's probably not the juicy answer you're looking for. So I'm trying to think of like something that I can like really go into. Um, there is a way in which like I am still looking, and it's funny, it's kind of attached to your second question. So I like that you already gave me a peek into what the second question was. Is I am still like consistently trying to figure out the best way that I can bring my particular medicine into the world. Which part of it feels like it's working. I just consider, as you know, that I've worked with some of your colleagues that I, am, yeah, have fostered AR, and now they are fostering AR in your community. I am training the leaders, like I am, well, the co-lead of the leadership program for ART that you just mentioned. I'm working with Hale in Stockholm, the breathwork thing, to train their facilitators so that this becomes more embodied. Um, I really, just being on this podcast kind of leans towards it, but I'm still a little bit sometimes, like, I do get these suggestions of like how to build a better base, how to work with more people. And there's a resistance to that for me. There's a resistance that I think I have this idea, and I don't know if I'm right, but I have this idea that the more I focus on fewer people, the like I'm not looking to dilute and work with 100 people when I could work with one person who leads 100 people. Like
Mm,
I specifically feel like who I want to work with are people who lead large groups of people, because I found myself that being a leader is often so lonely. I'm often like, who is holding the leaders? Because I think that's why we're having um so much abuse of power, because I think ultimately there's a lot of leaders who are not getting their needs met. And so they find it to be a very, very easy way. So I think there's a lot of like abuse of power and things like that are happening because they're not being held enough. So I'm like, one of the major challenges I have is like, how do I actually find those people who are open enough to recognize that they need this? And I often get in a little bit of a standstill because I kind of go between the dignity, the humility of like
mm,
knowing that I have something really to offer, knowing that I have like this thing that I can do, but maybe a little bit like not enough to say like, but who am I?
mm,
Like, I don't have a PhD. I don't have a something like that. Like I still do have some like 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 my education's from the streets. Like my education is from saving my own ass and bringing myself back from death. Like I know my cred. Like I got cred, and there's certain people who acknowledge that, but then there's also kind of a greater social structure that doesn't acknowledge me. So it feels really beautiful, like when you've asked me and I've been asked on other things, when my worth feels recognized and valued, it feels very tender to me, because there's still a part of me that says, but who why would anybody listen to me?
mm.
Like there's still a part of me that's still working on that. So that is probably the closest thing that I can answer your question with. And I'm wondering how that if that satisfies the question.
It really does, and it gave me such a like a love how I think your power really comes through in um, your your humility and in a beautiful way, like your ability to just like really like what you said there about training one person that will be a leader and or lead others, then instead of just being like training thousands of people and touching them just on the surface. And I really feel that that's what you should that's the path that it resonates super well with me, and I hope I get to train with you as well. I've done the ART level 1, and but hopefully in different shapes and forms we'll have a chance to really go deep and see what how we can evolve together, and how you can help me see parts of myself that I'm blind towards still.
Oh, that's super. Well, that's my main thing I love to do is I love to like really think my main way that I love to support people is to reflect back the parts of people that they often don't see in themselves, and in it from a in a way that we can actually really highlight and love those parts, because there's usually parts that we're not loving. Those are the parts that are not seen by ourselves.
Yeah.
So that's what I really want to focus on. And then to go to your final question, which is like just like segue right into that, is like I think you now hear like um so I am leading, these authentic relating trainings. I'm really focused more on the high level stuff, because there's enough people who can train kind of the elementary, where I really want to do work for people who are really at the next level of their evolution and ready to like really work on the fine stuff, and really to like they're ready to meet the parts of themselves that they might not have been ready for, because you know what, we like healing happens when it needs to happen. There's a lot of trauma we can't reach because it might re-traumatize and actually hurt us more. So we need to be at a certain place in our development to really address some of these like roadblocks. And
Yeah.
that's where I really like to work with people. So who I love to work with most are leaders, like are really people who are in leadership, and they just run into anything with like loneliness and just not feeling really seen, or they're feeling trapped in a role, or they're just like, or they're getting a lot of projections from the people that they facilitate time and time again. You don't have to be a leader of a big company or anything like that, but you're at the top of your game, and you're realizing a little bit of like what is missing is some connection with your heart and
Yeah.
some connection with intimacy. That is where I really love to work. And I have a limited number of slots for people to mentor and to coach and to guide. And I'm sure you'll put a link to my website, and people can kind
Of
of go
course.
and take a look and see what's there and see if it resonates. And my medicine isn't for everyone, and not everyone's for me. So we usually just set up a chemistry call, and we explore and we see if this is like a mutually like beneficial partnership to have. So
Based on this conversation, and also from like I said in the beginning, I feel highly attracted towards this, and I suggest everybody that listens to this go in and check out the website and feel, if you feel the calling, book in a call. I think this is potent stuff,
yeah.
and you are a potent, very potent person, and I I'm going to wrap it up here and bring us to a close, as we've been going for a solid one. It's probably the longest out of all the.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Yes.
But I really want to thank you for coming on this show, and for getting to know you and opening up about you. I feel very connected to you, and I really hope that you had a good experience here as well, and looking forward to evolving together with you and continue this journey with you. So you have to let me know the next time you're in Stockholm, and we're gonna meet.
Will do. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. It's felt really, yeah, beautiful. And like, of course, I'm talking with you, but I'm also imagining the people that will be listening to this. And so I'm just, thank you so much for you being that one person. This feels like a really, yeah, I just want to thank you for giving me a chance yeah, share my medicine in the way. So thank you so much for the opportunity. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm honored. And honored to be your first woman, the first of the others, I'm sure. So
Thank you.
thank you so much.
All right, we good? Thank you. Oh yeah, we gotta.
Was a pleasure.